the problem is not so much how do we polish up our narrative. When it is actually that our narrative is part of the problem and not part of the solution. Because we have a narrative that has come to us, has two parts. The first part was the Cold War narrative, the empire of evil, the Soviet Union. And the problem with the idea of this, of the evil, is that we see ourselves as somehow civilized, have culture and have values, and they are somehow inhuman. And being unhuman, therefore, they are evil, and evil, we must therefore be the polar opposite. We have European values, and we are therefore not in any way we are not in any way involved with the evil that has taken place. We cannot be, because that is the terms in which we've defined it. So the problem with this is it effaces totally the sense of any responsibility for what's happening. We don't have any sense that we have actually, over the last decades, been accomplices in the rise of jihadism, of, if you like, caliphate forces. Whether it was in Afghanistan or whether it was in other places, we have been accomplices. We have used them against Nasserism, against Russia, against the Soviet Union and Afghanistan, against Iran, and are now using them against Assad. But this is erased by the terms of our narrative. And the other part of that narrative was one, if you like, not only the Cold War narrative, that somehow you stare down your enemies, and that by staring down your enemies and giving no concessions, you win. This is the tactic now for ISIS. Military pressure, financial pressure, stare them down. The fact is, it doesn't reflect history. This wasn't what happened in the Cold War. And it gives us a sense of somehow that this was the right tool to use. But it was never the right tool in the Cold War. And then the neocons came and said, actually, all those secular Arab states, like Syria, Iraq, Egypt, were just Soviet agents, were part of, if you like, the evil, the satanic. So there is no sense of any responsibility for the West that states are how they are, or where they are, or a possibility to understand them. And in fact, maybe the states are not quite as we understand them, that they are rather different from understanding. And it does not reflect the fact that actually we have been using these forces for our own purposes. Because we see this, how could it possibly be that we're involved in something? Because we are the forces of good. And this is somehow the mindless barbarism of ISIS. And therefore we do not think and critically assess. So when we see, for example, Britain saying there are 70,000 moderates in Syria who are our people, our forces, we know that part of those are, if you like, Wahhabist, jihadist forces. It must be. There are not that many, if any, moderates left in Syria. So we are still, even in the aftermath of Paris, engaged in this language, but we take no responsibility. We just say we must all work together to deal with the problem. We have culture, we have civilization. We are, if you like, the forces of the good. We don't need to understand them. We don't need to attribute to them human motives or to have any sort of idea or program or political understanding of their own. Of course, ISIS does have that. It has objectives and has a political strategy. Even their use of terror has a strategy. We may not like it. It's offensive. It's brutal. But it is carefully, strategically considered.